Hello everyone, I am so sincerely happy to be here talking about this. This culture means so much to me. There will be a Q&A section at the end, so these 45 minutes are gonna fly by. We have a lot to cover, so I ask to please hold on to any questions till then. If you need, write them down, but I'm gonna try and get to everything. To begin, I just wanna jump right in, hit your senses first. And from there, I want to start y'all with a few rhetorical questions. If your ancestors graced the living world, what would they sound like? How would you describe their ancestral voices? And what would the soundtrack to their ancestral existence be? Today, we're going to explore these with the case study of Luvale music and spirit manifestation in Zambia. So, the goals of today's presentation. First, I'm hoping that by the end of this, you'll will have a basic understanding of the video you just saw. I'm also hoping to provide a bit of a foundational grasp of Luvale culture in Zambia, noting that that's a huge topic, so we'll leave with what we can get. And then finally, I want y'all to have, anyone who's an educator here, a foundation from which to teach 2 lessons on this topic. A little more specifically, though, I'm hoping to provide y'all with an introduction to makishi spirit manifestation. I want to describe the sonic world of makishi to y'all and inspire reflection on the power of timbre and the ways in which we describe it. Finally, provide a basic information on how the makishi sonic world is organized with a special focus on music of the percussion ensemble. So the outline of the presentation, first, got to address the elephant in the room, and I'll talk about how I ended up here. I'll trace my personal connection to Zambia, Luvale music and culture. Then we'll quickly move through some background information on the Luvale, talk about makishi, vocal timbre, drumming, and hoping that I timed this correctly, we'll have enough time for a little bit of group music making at the end. Okay, so why me? Why am I talking about this? How did my connection start? I'm a drummer. I have been a drummer since I was 8 or so. I don't know, I've been drumming more than I've been doing most anything else in my life. And I was a jazz drummer. I went to New Orleans and I lived there for a while. And I had this naive but hopeful dream that, if I go back to Africa, I'll understand jazz better. So I went to Ghana in 2011, and almost completely forgot about jazz as soon as I got there, just because I became obsessed with the traditional music there. And that started it planted the seed that just grew very, very quickly. As soon as I finished my undergrad, I kind of created an opportunity for myself in Zambia to go and teach jazz drum set at a music academy there, the Ngoma Dolce Music Academy, which was located right there in Lusaka, the capital of Zambia. Whenever I wasn't teaching, I was taking lessons with traditional and contemporary Ngoma drummers. And I would always ask my teachers, where are the best drums in Zambia? Where are the best drummers? Where's the best music? And the answer was always the same. You need to go find some Luvale-speaking people in the Northwest. And when I first did, I went to Zambezi right there. That was probably, easily the most important day in my life. When I first heard that group, it was Lenga Navo. Just immediately I thought, man, this is what music's supposed to sound like, and knew from then on that that's the rest of my life. With every subsequent trip back to Zambia, I would just get deeper and deeper focused into Luvale culture. It started, my connection to Zambia was a little more Pan-African, Pan-Zambian at the beginning, and then with every trip got deeper and deeper into Luvale world. Eventually this led to my partnering with the Likumbili-Amize Cultural Association, which is an organization dedicated to the preservation, promotion, and protection of Luvale traditional culture. I became a student and co-worker of 4 different primary troops who I've got listed there. I took lessons with them, I performed alongside them, we became close friends, and we'd be at festivals together, traditional ceremonies, the whole gamut. So that's how I came to this music. But now let's talk a little bit more about what exactly the words Luvale mean and how that will inform everything that's coming next. So the Luvale are a matrilineal Bantu group. Bantu is this large grouping of African ethno-linguistic groups. And the Luvale are primarily located in this region of Zambia, northwestern and western Zambia. But importantly, as the rightmost picture shows, the Luvale don't fit neatly into these colonial borders that were drawn up at the Berlin Conference. So the Luvale actually historically and presently live in what's currently called Angola, mostly eastern Angola, this southern central part of Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that region of Zambia we were talking about. I wish we had more time to talk about this, but the fact that Luvale is spread into these 3 different cultures, each of which country has been colonized by a different power, has created these very complex and complicated, not rifts, but it's changed the way that Luvale culture exists in each of these places, from how words are spelled to pronounced to just what happens in the traditional ceremonies. Likumbili-Amize in Zambia looks very different than Likumbili-Amize in Angola, for example. In Zambia, Luvale is one of the main 7 languages, which, among other things, means it's a language that's taught in school. It's one of the languages that national news is presented in. What else? So the Luvale also belong to this larger homogeneous cultural grouping. That's what the middle picture is showing. And within this grouping, we're talking about the Chokwe, Luchazi, Luvale, Mbunda, and various other smaller groups. They have kind of this shared cultural heritage that covers this pretty large area of the African continent. Among many things that these cultures share is the practice of mukanda, which is singular, or mikanda, plural. Again, we could spend an entire presentation just on what mukanda is, but for now it will suffice to say mukanda is a traditional initiation school for boys aged anywhere from, let's say, like 7 to 15. The exact age will vary based on the village. But when it's time for a mukanda, usually the cold, dry season in Zambia, so around June it would start, boys go into a secluded camp in the woods, in the bush, where they stay. The only people who can come in are other people who have passed through mukanda initiation as well. Another practice that is shared amongst these groups is what's called makishi. Makishi, again, plural, likishi is singular. In a lot of Bantu languages, especially Luvale, you pluralize or singularize something with a prefix, not a suffix. We'll run into that a few times today. Makishi are ancestral spirits, and the practice of makishi is an ancestral spirit manifestation. I and others in the tradition prefer this to a description such as masquerade. Masquerade draws a little more attention to the physical components, which is a part of makishi spirit manifestation, but just looking the part does not make you an ancestor. There's much more that comes with that. There are dozens, probably maybe 100 or so different types of ancestral spirits, different types of makishi. And these represent a huge range of things. Anything from animals, the spirit of a hyena, munguli, spirit of a pig, ngulu, and some of the points of these spirits are to teach Luvale culture how these animals are situated within Luvale society. So we have those spirits. We have spirits of idealized young feminine beauty. That's in spirits such as Chiwigi, Mwanapuevo. You have spirits that represent ancient kings and chiefs from long ago who their history and their story gets immortalized through these spirits. We have just spirits that are monsters, such as Chikishikishi. And we have jesters. There's a huge, huge range of these spirits. Becoming a likishi, performing makishi, you're not possessed. In fact, you're not supposed to know who's in there, who's in the body and the head in general, because you're not looking at a performer, you're looking at the spirit themselves. That said, it is still, in a way, a drama that gets acted out by the entire community. Makishi performance doesn't happen on a stage that's separated from everything else. The stage is kind of wherever the spirits go. And the actors in this theater, if we want to continue with this extended metaphor, it's not people who have agreed to be in this. The actors are anyone who can interact with these spirits. So if the spirit comes up to you, you're a part of the theater now. And culture will tell you how you're supposed to interact and engage with that spirit. If it's a fearsome likishi, you're supposed to run away unless you're someone who's been initiated. If it's a rude likishi who just shouts orders like sakashivi or utenu, you're supposed to listen and fall in line. If it's a playful likishi, such as Wanapuevo, you're supposed to play with that likishi, with that spirit. Going through a process called enculturation, just existing within the culture. Everyone becomes a culture bearer. If you are enculturated, you know how you're supposed to interact with each of these makishi. And importantly, as I mentioned before, you can't just look the part. If you throw on the mask, the head, they prefer to call head or mutwe. If you put on the head, you put on the body, you are not the spirit. In order to be a likishi, you also need to have the correct personality. That means if you're a rude likishi, you need to be rude. You need to hurl the insults or say the things that are on brand for that spirit. Also, some makishi vocalize. This could be singing, speaking, or just some other kind of vocalization that might not fit well into our Western classificatory scheme. But if you're a vocalizing makishi, another part of the embodiment of this spirit is making sure that you have the correct vocal timbre. So let's talk about timbre for a second. Does anyone, and this is not rhetorical, does anyone know what timbre is or feel like throwing out a guess? There are no wrong answers. Okay, y'all are off the hook for now. We'll kind of talk about in a second why it's difficult to explain timbre. But ways that I like to think about timbre, it's sound quality, it's the tone color. We often talk in these metaphoric ways about timbre. In another way of looking at it, it is what makes something sound like itself. If we think of rhythm and pitch as things that a sound does, it can go up, it can go down, it can go long, it could go short. We often think of timbre as the sound itself. If we want to kind of define it through the negative, timbre is everything in a sound that's not volume, pitch, or duration. So if all of those things are the same, timbre is what makes them still unique. So, unfortunately, this is a shy group, which means I need to call on people. Don't take it personally, but can you say the word dog? Okay. Can everyone hear? All right. Once more? Okay. Can you say the same word at the same pitch? Good. Did that sound the same? I saw one head shaking no. Timbre. Timbre is the reason. Even if we match pitch, we match duration. A trumpet plays A3, a violin plays A3. They hold them out for the exact same amount of time. They're not going to sound the same. That's timbre. Every sound has a vocal timbre. That's a timbre, that's a slightly different timbre. It's the aspect of sound that kind of lies beyond pitch. As such, as we saw, it is very intricately and inherently tied to things like the vocalizer, the instrument, or the sound source. So it's very much tied to sound source recognition. You hear a basketball bounce, and you could almost immediately tell that's a basketball. You hear someone sing in the shower or sing outside on top of a mountain, you're going to hear that, oh, these sounds come from different places, even if you don't see what's happening. There's a lot with timbre. And if we want to talk a little more acoustically, a little more scientifically, timbre is determined by the relationships of overtones in the sonic spectrum. Unfortunately, that explanation will take a little more to unpack, so we'll leave that there. But as we ran into earlier, timbre is kind of difficult to talk about. Unlike pitch, where we can measure frequency exactly and say it's 440 hertz, or rhythm, where we can say, oh, this sound lasted for 5 seconds and 20 milliseconds, for example. Timbre is a little more difficult to measure. As such, we've kind of come up with these very interesting and very idiosyncratic ways of describing timbre that kind of only works within those specific communities. So if I'm a musician laying down a bass line, I might try and go for a fat bass sound. There is nothing that's actually fat about that sound, but the engineer will know exactly what I mean by fat. Or if you say, give me a crunchy guitar tone, people in a rock scene will know exactly what that means. But crunchy might be elicit a completely different sound in a different culture. So let's kind of bring this back to makishi. Each vocalizing makishi has a specific vocal timbre that it's supposed to have. If you don't vocalize that likishi with that timbre, that's not the spirit. If you give the spirit of the young woman, likishi ya mwana puevo, a very low, rough voice, that is not the spirit of, that is not the voice, the vocal timbre of idealized feminine beauty in that culture. And it's really important to add that little asterisk, that qualification at the end, because timbre is very culturally dependent. What might be considered a fearsome timbre in one culture is completely different in another culture. So, how are we describing timbre? Research has shown that kind of across at least quite a few cultures, a lot of people use a pretty similar way of describing it. That might be through something like association, which means we might have a known quality in our head already. So we describe timbre by comparing it to that. We might say like, oh yeah, I want that early 70s sound. If you listen to 80s pop, there is a snare drum sound for the 80s. There is a synthesizer sound that as soon as you hear that, you think, oh yeah, 80s. So you're describing timbre by associating it to these known entities. We might also do vocables that don't really use real words, but instead we're literally mimicking the sound. If we're talking about jazz, the basic swing pattern, or what's often called the stripper beat, the tss, 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 I'm describing the timbre in that way as well. We might use more affect. This could be words like, oh, it's mellow, or it's powerful, he's got a weak voice, or an expressive violin tone. Within this world also falls evaluations, such as, oh, he's got a bad timbre, I don't like her tone, things like that. We also do this metaphorical description through matter. We might say, oh, that person has a dry sound, or that drum is kind of metallic. Even though there's actually nothing metallic about a sound cannot be physically dry, but we say that, and within specific groups, we know what that means. We might use this sort of cross-modal correspondence, where we describe timbre by mapping it onto other sensory experiences, such as it's a bright sound. A lot of people in classical music might say that about the trumpet, but there's actually nothing visual about the sound of a trumpet that makes it bright or dark. We might use mimesis, saying it's nasal, where we're describing it through mimicked action, or just normal action. It's a penetrating sound, it's piercing. We might use acoustic, saying it's a sonorous sound, it's shrill, it cuts. Or, and this is especially prominent in percussion, we might use onomatopoeia. It's a buzzing, it's rattling, it's cracking. All of these words are how we creatively describe timbre. So, what are the timbre of makishi? What are the timbre of these vocalizing spirits? This recording we're about to hear, let me just pull up the information on it. This was recorded in a village in Angola called Kambonge. This was back in 1965, although it was released on an album in 1981. And what you're going to hear here is what happens in a Luvale, or I think technically this is an Mbuela, one of the related cultures, in an Mbuela village when the Likishi Kalelwa comes to the village. Now, Kalelwa is a fearsome Likishi. Kalelwa is one of the Likishi who instructs and protects the boy initiates in the Mukanda school we depicted earlier. As such, if you're not initiated, you're supposed to keep your distance. So despite the pretty decent recording we're about to hear, Kalelwa is not close to the women who are singing. So this is what happens when the women receive Kalelwa into a village. And I am going to call on people after. So what I want you to keep in mind while we listen to this, there's going to be the women singing, and then there's going to be Kalelwa interjecting with two different kinds of vocalizations. Try and focus on Kalelwa's voice. It'll become pretty obvious which is his. Breaks my heart to do it, but time's not on our side. Okay, so we could just nod or shake our head. Were you all able to tell which voices belong to the women and which belong to the spirit? Yeah, good. Okay. I'm just going to point, don't be shy. How would you describe the voice in any way you want? There's really no wrong answer here. How about you? You heard penetrating. Great. All right. And it doesn't even need to be one of these words here, but if it's the right word, by all means. How about you? Shrill. Okay. These are great words. They're also words that are here. So again, doesn't need to be here, but if it's the right word, go for it. How about you? Screechy. Okay. So I'm hearing here is mostly everyone's going to that one vocalization Khalil was doing, not the second. It's the louder of the two, so probably a little easier to latch onto. So within Luvale culture, this is how Kalelwa's voice is described. The most frequent one is actually through a verb, kulikua, which literally means to scream or cheer out. How would y'all, again, feel free to shout out answers. To scream or cheer out, what kind of timbre descriptor would we say that is? Great. I would probably agree, but again, these things are not set in stone. It's just ways of classificating the world around us. We have another verb, kukanguka, to be dried out. So a lot of Luvale people might consider Kalelwa's voice dry. Which classification scheme would this fit in? Okay, so you're attaching it to another descriptor. That could totally work. And actually, both of those, thin and dry, exist within the matter world. I heard someone say shrill before. The Luvale word for shrill, katenda, is there as well. No one was really talking about the second type of vocalization Kalelwa was doing, or or kind of inhales the voice, but a lot of Luvale people will call that kusweka, literally to be hidden. And finally, in a lot of the interviews I conducted, people would describe Kalelwa's voice through association to other makishi, saying, oh yeah, he's got a similar voice to Chikuza, or Chikeza, or Kamutonga, or Kambulu. Importantly, all of these makishi that have been used to describe Kalelwa originate from the same tribe, Chokwe. So in a way, this is one Luvale, one group, one ethno-linguistic group who describes the ancestral voices of another tribe as all being very similar. Okay, we're gonna step away from vocal timbre a little bit and now move towards the percussion that often accompanies and backs up this ancestral spirit manifestation. As we'll discuss, there are quite a few settings that makishi performance will happen in, and depending on the setting, depending on the spirit, there's going to be a different instrumentation. So I've broken it down into what I call chilende instrumentation and recreational instrumentation. When we're talking about chilende instrumentation, we're mostly talking about aggressive makishi, such as the one we just saw. The settings that will use this kind of drumming will be like a Mukanda graduation, a lot of festivals, a lot of ceremonies. And in this way, we basically end up with different timbres, collective timbres of an entire ensemble, depending on the setting. The word chilende literally means both a dancing event, where makishi will showcase their skills, as well as the place where the event happens itself. In these vilende, which is the plural of chilende, in these settings, anyone theoretically can try drumming. However, if you fail, if you don't perform well, you will be kicked off immediately. Unfortunately, I know from experience. I've also been on the other side, but it's a part of it. So again, this is a very communal setting, these vilende. And if you're someone who thinks you know, oh, I know that spirit likes to dance to this style, let me try and play one of these drums, you go and you try. Hopefully you sound good with the rest of the group. Recreational instrumentation, on the other hand, kind of talks about the fact that not every one of these ancestral manifestations is a very ceremonial thing. I think a lot of people might expect, oh, anytime there's a spirit, this is a very serious situation. But a lot of these spirits, especially Likishi Pueblo, the spirit of the young girl, they happen to come out, we'll say resurrect from the grave, to go to bars on Friday and Saturday nights, and they'll be there with their group of drummers and they'll try and make money. This is a professional music performance for some of these spirits. As such, this usually involves a bit more of a rehearsed group, a group that's usually professional, or at least they've spent time working on probably 2 or 3 dances that they know very well. These makishi, they can also resurrect for hired events, like a professional troupe that's fronted by Moana Pueblo. They might be hired for a political event or a corporate gig. I've been at things where a new car lot is opening and they want a little touch of the ancestral, so you hire Chota group and have their Likishi Moana Pueblo, their spirit of the young girl, fronting. This is all still part of the tradition. So, in the lesson plans that I've created that accompany this, I provide, I think, 2 or 3 more examples. So we're going to quickly go through just 2 different sets of makishi and describe that. But if you're curious, the lesson plan has more. And if that doesn't quell your curiosity, hit me up. My dissertation will have plenty more. So for the dances called Chianda and Mokolo, which both have kind of alternate spellings, these dances mostly accompany friendly makishi, such as Moana Pueblo, the first one we saw in that first video. Also, Chilea Chamukanda, which literally means the fool of the initiation school. Chilea is a jester. Chindoka, and then over here in Dondo, that is the rude likishi I kept referencing. And then finally, over there, we have Ngulu, which is the spirit of the pig. Chianda Mokolo, when they're danced, they involve many different dance styles, but almost all of them require some sort of waist or hip isolation. If you're a spirit who dances chianda or morcolo, chances are you wear what's called chiwamba, or if it's plural, viwamba. And this is this very specific kind of waist belt. It's on all of them except chindoka, because chindoka doesn't really have a waist. Anyway, what we're seeing is that the spirit's personality, their music, and importantly, the instrumentation, recreational instrumentation, the dance moves, and the exact costume, they all kind of coalesce and are grouped together. We could compare that with a different style, such as kuhunga. Kuhunga uses chilende instrumentation, and everyone who dances kuhunga will have what's called zombo, or plural jizombo, and these are these sort of bark cloth skirts. And the kuhunga dance is characterized by a specific type of swiveling motion that I think Kawiawia shows sets the jizombo in a very specific and visually pleasing style. The makishi who dance kuhunga are very aggressive. If you're not initiated, stay away from one of these spirits. Most of these makishi are aggressive because they are protectors of the tundanji. They protect the initiates who've passed through their school. The spirit we heard before, Kalelwa, is one of the spirits who dances dances kuhunga. I think that'll do for now. In the lesson plans, there are video examples of each of these as well. So, what exactly, with the little time we have left, what exactly are the differences in this instrumentation? First of all, they each have a different lead drum, which hopefully these images show you. The lead drum for chilende instrumentation is one right here. It's what's called shina, or depending where exactly in Zambia or this cultural region you are, might be called ntangi, various words. For recreational instrumentation, the lead drum is what's called ngoma puita. That drum right there. We'll hear from that in a second. The lead drum's job in this ensemble, whether it's shina or ngoma puita, is to control the dance. It has a large vocabulary that it can, it's a problematized word in academia, but it can improvise with. It can start and stop when it wants. It's supposed to be in the foreground while every other instrument kind of fades into the background. And a lot of the reason that our mind stratifies the music, the ensemble as such, is because of the unique timbres of both of these drums. We'll get to that in a second. Both ensembles have what's called supporting drums. Both have ngoma ya kachi, literally means the middle drum, and ngoma ya kusongo, literally means the last drum. In the recreation ensemble, those are the only drums that exist as supporting drums. But in chilende instrumentation, we also have a third, the highest pitch, called ngoma ya kasumbi, which literally translates as the chicken drum. I haven't gotten a clear answer as to why it's called that. Sometimes groups will also call it ngoma ya kusulo songo, like the last drum. These drums, their aesthetic goal is to sound like one. Even though they're two parts, they interlock almost in a way that the two sides of a zipper kind of fit together. And they fill in each other's spaces, and you're left with one auditory stream, with one sonic line. And this line repeats with little to no variation for the entirety of the dance. So if it's a 7-minute dance, you might just hear one part from one of those drums played for 7 minutes. To some, they might think that's a boring thing, but it is physically taxing, and if you do it in the way that happens in the culture where you don't kind of diminish as you play, if anything, you give more energy, it becomes a little faster, a little louder as the song progresses, it is one of the more challenging things to do, and making someone dance just by going for 7 minutes straight is no easy feat. Then both instruments have what's called a timeline, or a mikakaji is literally the instrument here. Mikakaji, they play these timelines, which instead of, in a lot of Western musical settings, you might count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and everyone knows where they're supposed to align their things. Or if we're in a classical setting with a conductor, literally counting out visually what we're supposed to do. The mikakaji, or whatever the timeline is, serves that purpose. And what basically happens with this is each note of the repeating mikakaji phrase acts as a phrasing referent. So you won't think, oh, if I'm playing this drum, I line up with beat 1. It's not how it works. You think, okay, what part of mikakaji's phrase do I line up with? So if the phrase is, you might think I come in. You think of your part in relation to other parts. That's how time is perceived by many, not all, in a lot of this. Now we'll notice in recreational instrumentation, there's actually an additional timeline instrument, what's called injenje or mingongwela, has different titles. As you can see here, it's actually a guy playing two glass bottles. This is not a very standardized instrument. Several things that can get that same timbre, this bright, metallic, glassy timbre, can fill that role. So maybe it's two bottles, or a knife on a bottle, or two hollow metallic rods, or two bicycle bells. I've seen many different things used to give us the injenje, but ultimately, we're trying to support and spice up that timeline. So, I have the drums, we might as well hear them. First, if we're doing mikakaji, you use sticks that are much thicker than this, but my sticks were stolen. And you basically play the timeline literally on the side of a drum. So if we're in shilende instrumentation, you're playing on the side of shina. If we're in recreational instrumentation, we're going to be on the side right here of the ngoma puita. And then you fill in the space with your other hand. And you repeat that for maybe 7 minutes. Very fast, too. All day, and with sticks that are probably the width of maybe 5 of these combined, literally sticks off of trees. Might also call them mungongo or mingongo. Then we have the ngoma itself. Now, if we're ngoma yakachi, ngoma yakusongo, or ngoma yakasumbi, those are basically just going to be bigger or smaller versions of this. And these parts are created by timbral differentiation. These drums do not give you an A at 440 hertz or anything like that. You tune these drums relative to each other. So ngoma yakachi should be lower than ngoma yakusongo, which is lower than ngoma yakasumbi. You can more or less produce 3, sometimes 4 different sounds on this. The open, a bass, which isn't used too much with supporting drums, a slap, just so you could hear how much that differs, I'm going to do open slap. And then kind of a muffled, which is like a pressing. And again, fast. Then, my favorite, we have ngoma puita. This is the lead drum of the recreational instrumentation. With this drum, you need to have a wet hand, and I'll show this after during the Q&A, but there's a reed in the middle of the drum, and with your wet hand, you pull and push it. Then you change the pitch of the drum with your left hand. And in performance, so, I don't want you to focus on the notation I have there. It's there if you need it. We don't have a lot of time, so the training wheels are on the tricycle if we need. In the lesson plan, I provide both a slide that has the notation and doesn't. Reasoning for this, imposing Western standard notation or even something as flexible as Tubbs notation on music that doesn't come from that tradition, in many ways is most definitely a colonial enterprise. It's a way of forcing one cultural product into a system that it was not designed for. It can have pedagogical benefits though, so for now it's here. Anyway, in the tradition, and in many different African traditions and diasporic traditions, you might teach or represent or notate music through a system of vocables or verbal representation. What might happen with this is we can speak the part, and that gives you all the timbral and rhythmic information you need to play the part. So, in the Mokolo dance, which is one of the recreational dances that the Likishi, the Amanapuevo, the spirit of the young girl, the first spirit we saw in that video, it's one of the spirits that dances to Mokolo. The Ngoma Yakachi, the middle drum, so now we're combining all these terms we've hit today, will go pingichi, pingichi, pingichi. So you could hear how each vocalization represents a different kind of note. Repeat after me. Pingichi. Pingichi. Good. We can't be shy because we're about to make some music together. Pingichi, pingichi. And now let's try and keep it in rhythm. Pingichi, pingichi. Pingichi, pingichi. Now don't stop. Pingichi, 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 pingichi. And now we can stop. Awesome, y'all. So how this might get used, if it's a ceremonial setting and I want to hop into the chilende and drum, what spirit are we playing for? Oh, this is Manapuevo. Okay, what does Manapuevo like? Oh, Manapuevo likes Mokolo. Okay, how's the middle drum go? Pingichi, pingichi. Cool, got it. That's how, and that is such a quick but very effective and efficient system of giving this, of notating and representing this music. So the smaller drum, Ngoma Yakusongo, will go mbele, bele, bele, bele. Good. Bele, bele. Now importantly, y'all sound great. Importantly with this one, that happens off of the beat. Bele, 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 bele. Keep going. I'll stop you there. Make sure you don't speak on the beat. That's what this represents here. Note where you don't play. So the okay, great. Now to finish today off, if you're shy, I am not. So we're going to capitalize on that. This side's a little, all right. This row over, pingichi. This row, mbele. We're going to simulate what it's like to make this music together as a group, knowing very well that when this happens in the culture, it might be one person on each. Pingichi, 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 pingichi. All day. Don't stop until I tell you to stop. Bele, 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 bele. Let's try and get this to meld a little more. If I point to your group, stop. This group's not even united as one. Pingichi, pingichi, pingichi. While this is happening, in your head, think. Bele, bele. Bele, bele. Don't speed up. Bele, 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 bele. Pingichi, pingichi, pingichi. Keep going. So what happened there is actually an important mistake for us to have as a group. It is really easy when you're focusing on your part to kind of get thrown off by one of the other parts. A lot of people who are at the beginning of this process might think of this as like almost being alone together. I'm going to get thrown off if I listen to pingichi, so just himbele, himbele, himbele. And then if we throw an instrument on top that's changing its parts all the time, it is so easy to fall off. But that's kind of the power of this music. When you can do it correctly, it is such a rewarding musical experience. And I hope that today I shared some of that rewarding experience with y'all. I think we have a little bit of time for questions, and I, if you can't tell, love talking about this stuff, so all your questions I'll happily take. Thank you. So in case you couldn't hear, the question was about how does studying this kind of music tradition influence my jazz drum set ability? And I mean, the answer is I can't even begin to underline the enormous effect it's had. In one, it's just changed the way I view repetition. In this music, repetition, or as some scholars like Meki and Zewi prefer, recycling, because nothing's ever a true repetition. Repetition doesn't mean monotony. When you can find the beauty and the groove in being able to more or less play the same thing for 7 minutes and keep it interesting the entire time, I mean, that's the goal of drum set players. So many of us will talk about like keeping things in the pocket, like the groove is in the pocket. That's what that is, just like not playing too much, but making it feel good the entire time. Also, jazz, when it initially began, was dance music. The whole point of this music is to make people dance, people's spirits. If I can't make people dance with my drums, then I'm doing something wrong. So my goals are slightly different. I'm always trying to find ways to translate a Zambian Luvale percussion ensemble for drum set. So that's kind of a goal, a book I'm working on as well. And it's just really shifted my focus to timbre as well. I think with drums especially, it's an instrument that can't really play melodically or harmonically. So what we can do is play with all this timbral diversity. And I think really, really embracing that. Yeah, great question. The role of timbre. That is my dissertation. So I could speak about this for a while. One way to approach this is there are different levels of timbre. If we want to go on the smallest level, the drumming itself that supports the makishi, every note has a different timbre. So how you relate these timbres within one instrument is something. We could go a little bit broader, and instead of thinking of all of the timbres that one instrument can do, we can start to think about what is the global timbre of something. So what is the timbre of a violin, even though in reality a violin can produce many timbres. So that's where we might go towards makishi voices. There is one voice that is this makishi or that spirit or anything like that. So that's a little more of a global approach. Then we can start talking orchestration, because more or less the practice of orchestration, whatever style of music, whatever music culture we're in, is basically just how do you combine different timbres? Combine or alternate, how do you relate timbres to each other? So what happens if you put this timbre of that drum with that timbre of that spirit? Do they blend? Do they stand out? Do we kind of get this orchestral stratification, this idea of layers, of a foreground, a middle ground, a background? So many of these things are results of timbre. And then, like I was talking about with the different kinds of instrumentation, chilende instrumentation versus recreational, these are different timbres. So basically, one spirit might have a completely different timbral palette than another. But if this is something you're very curious about, I see you taking notes, which I love. Find me after. I could talk your ear off about this for hours. They won't sing the parts, so they won't sing the vocable. You won't get pingichi, 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 pingichi. That's more a learning thing, but you'll sing songs. So almost, we didn't really get to talk about the group vocals, a little bit with Kalelwa's song, but almost always this music has call and response vocals, usually a choir on top. And the more professional of a group you are, the better your ability to sing while playing. It's a really important skill. It becomes a little easier if your part repeats a lot. So for maybe mikakaji, that part does not change at all, so you're gonna sing while you do that. But Shina, the lead drum for Chilende or Ngoma Puita, you're changing a lot. So it's very difficult to sing a song while also improvising. It happens, but not as much as with the other instruments. But yeah, everyone needs to know song, dance, and music in some form. The best drummers are the ones who can dance well. The best dancers are the one who knows the drum. There's such a connection between these things. I'm talking about timbre, and I'm isolating that from all these different parameters, but in reality, we can't separate timbre from pitch and duration, and in this tradition, we can't separate song from dance, from spirit. All these things are connected, so the more you can connect them within your own embodiment, I think the better. Can everyone hear me with that microphone? Yeah. Apologies for the recording. As you can see, hopefully, there's a kind of a bamboo-ish reed in here, what's called lihongo. When you have a wet hand, you will push or pull the lihongo. Basically, as the lihongo, as the reed is attached and affixed to the head, you're putting the head into vibration, but in a very different way than if you just hit it. So you get a very different timbre because you have a very different way of exciting it. So once that's happening, then you change the pitch with your left hand. Basically, with all of these drums, also, we don't have to be, the talk technically is over, so if you want to like get closer, if that'll help you see, that's cool. With these drums, any kind of headed drum, if you apply pressure, it gets higher pitched. So if there's no pressure, that's what we're going to hear. If we add a little bit of pressure with our left hand, and that can happen when you push or pull. I'm doing both there. And then there's one other spot. So I'm more in the center of the drum and I'm using a little more pressure. And maybe just to help our case a little more, if any of y'all listen to samba, the Brazilian style of music, they have a descendant of this drum, the cuica, and the cuica is a small handheld one that more or less makes this sound as well, but much higher. And because of the fact that, let's go back to the maps real quick. As you can see, Luvale culture and related tribes go into Angola. Angola is where a lot of Brazilian slaves came from. So there's a very transatlantic diasporic reason that cuica exists here, or puita exists here and cuica exists in Brazil. I don't have a drum set. So most of the ways that I put this into jazz is through drum set, but I have put together like a Zambian jazz fusion group that occasionally plays in town. Couldn't get them for this. But if you're curious, hit me up. I love sharing music. I'd be happy to send you some videos or songs or anything like that. Yeah. So it's not a rule that's written in stone, but I've very rarely come across women drummers. One of the main reasons for that is, although drumming is a public art, and even someone like me, an outsider to the tradition, is allowed to learn it, it is often taught culturally within Mukanda, the private boys' initiation school. So if one of the main places where this instrument is even taught traditionally in the culture is gender segregated, then the result, even if it's not women cannot play, men must play, is going to be that reality. That said, the injenje, the bottles over there, maybe it's due to the fact that it's kind of less of a standardized instrument, but I've seen many women play that. And even if women aren't expected to perform these instruments, a lot of them know it. I mean, one of the ways this music is taught, if it's not through vocables, it's just through watching it happen. And I mean, no person is around this more than the women who dance this music. And again, the best dancers are the ones who know this stuff as well. I've seen plenty female dancers who are upset with how the drumming's going down. They come down, they take the instrument away, they're like, do it like that. And then they like go back to dancing and the person's been put in his place. But especially in vilende, the plural of chilende, this kind of instrumentation though, it's a lot more rare to see women doing that. The place where you'll really see women drumming in Zambia and related areas are in what's often called, we can translate it to like a kitchen party. It's part of a wedding ceremony. It's usually, again, a pretty gendered situation, but that's where you'll get a lot of women drumming. Any other questions, or are we out of time? Oh, my last plug. sorry. This is the most important plug, but need to save it for the end. If you like this culture, if you find it beautiful, or even if, frankly, if you hate it, it doesn't matter. If you want to help support it, please find me after, or I guess now. I can help connect you with some cultural organizations. Luvale people are about to have their large ceremony, Kumbiliamize, next week, I think. So there are many ways to help financially support these groups. Thank you.